Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Metroid, brought to us by Nintendo. Originally released in 1986 for the Famicom Disk System, it was then ported over to the North American NES in 1987. A few years later, when Metroid 2 was released for the Nintendo Game Boy, they re-released the original Metroid for NES with a new box art. So here we go with Metroid for the NES. In this run of the game, I will be doing 100%, getting all of the missile containers, the energy tanks, and of course all of the weaponry. Before jumping into the game, if you wait a little bit at the title screen, you'll get a bit of story, but that's pretty much all we have. The rest was told through the game's manual. After pressing start at the title screen, you then can put in a password or jump into the game. The password system in Metroid is an interesting one, with a whole variety of different things that can end up affecting the game and giving you different versions of things. The most famous probably being the Justin Bailey code, that if you put the name Justin Bailey and the rest spaces, this starts the game with Samus with most of the upgrades, as well as her in the leotard, which is something you unlock if you beat the game in under 2 hours, and then start a new game, she'll be in that suit. As soon as we begin the game though, we're going to head over to the left and grab the first of our upgrades or items, the Morph Ball. This of course allows us to turn into a ball form and roll around, and we'll be doing this obviously a lot throughout the course of the game. Being Metroid, the game is a giant maze, and it's non-linear for the most part. You'll have to explore, find items, backtrack, blow open walls, and look for tons of secrets. There's some really well hidden stuff, so if you're going for that 100%, you really have to keep an eye open and make sure that you find all the paths and all the rooms to find these items. A few of which I'm wondering how anyone honestly found without some sort of a guide. After heading right a few rooms from the opening, we're going to get to this big long chamber, and we're going to start heading upwards. This is the first of what will be many climbs throughout the course of the game. Slowly work your way up, watching out for most of the enemies. As you can see, there's really only 2 types you have to worry about. These ones that kind of just move back and forth, they cannot be destroyed, at least not with our normal beam. And there's also the zoomers. As you can see, they kind of like move around the individual platforms. As you make your way up, eventually you'll see a door on the right side. You'll have to open that up and head on through a small chamber, which will take you to another area that's similar to the chamber we were just climbing, except now we're going to head south. The story of Metroid has you playing as Samus Aran, who is working with the Galactic Federation Police to deal with space pirates. Their base is located deep within the planet Zebes. As a last-ditch effort, they send Samus in order to go in and try to destroy the base. The reason why the space pirates are of interest is that they have stolen a creature that was found on a planet. The fear is that this creature will multiply and potentially destroy worlds because it had already destroyed the population of the planet they were found on. Traveling through this room, we come across the first of what will end up being very many missile tanks or missile packs that end up giving us 5 missiles every time we find them. There are a few that end up giving you a big amount of them. These are the ones you get for defeating the 2 bosses, Ridley and Kraid, so that you have plenty of missiles to destroy Mother Brain. The creature that everyone's worried about is named Metroid, and of course they're worried that if the space pirates have control of them and they multiply, there's untold damage that could end up happening. After this incident with the Metroids, it's decided that they should all be destroyed, and that's where the story of Metroid 2 ends up picking up. The planet Zebes is broken up into several different areas. You have Brinstar, which is where we start off, you have Norfair, Turian, and then the 2 hideouts of the bosses Ridley and Kraid. Each area of the game is separated by an elevator, so you at least know when you're going between the areas, and this worked as a great way to kind of mask load times in the original version of the title. Along with the missile tanks, there's other weapons and items that we'll be finding, including energy tanks, which thankfully give us a lot more health. It's very annoying early on in the game, you have very little health, but my main issue is the beeping that happens non-stop when you are at low health. Thankfully, not too far into the run, I do come across the first of the energy tanks, so I don't have to worry about that for too long. The game has a lot of hallways that are very similar to one another, so it's very easy, especially when I was a kid, to get turned around. In this room, we come to that first energy tank, and thankfully not a moment too soon, so that we can end up having not only 99 health back, but we also now have another full 99 health that's in reserved. That's represented by the blue square that's now above our energy. Of course, below that is the current health we have, as well as the missiles below that. In order to go between your normal shot and the missiles, you have to press the select button. The missiles are a lot more powerful and are a necessity in order to defeat Mother Brain and get through that area, as well as open the red doors throughout the game. It requires at least 5 missiles to destroy one of these red doors, and early on, until you get a bunch of the missiles, it can be annoying to try to replenish them in order to make sure you have enough to destroy the doors. Speaking of which, our first one is located over here to the left. Jump up here, switch to the missiles, and blast open the door. Inside you will find the first of the Chozo statues, destroy the orb with a normal shot, and you'll find the first item, which in this case is the mines, and the mines are what you can end up dropping when you're in Morph Ball form. And this is where the real fun begins in the game. Using the Morph Ball as well as the mines, you can get to really high platforms and can do a lot of crazy stuff with the jumping. I won't be doing any glitches in the game, but I will be doing some tricks as far as the jumping is concerned to help get through areas a little bit quicker. A big part of the Metroid series is trying to beat the games quickly, as this determines what ending you end up getting. There's 5 endings in total. If you go over 10 hours, you end up getting the worst ending. If you go 5 or more hours, you end up getting the worst ending. But then it's the endings for the middle to best ending that ends up revealing that you're actually playing as a female character. If you're able to beat the game between 3 and 5 hours, you end up taking off the helmet, revealing Samus with her hair flowing. Interestingly enough, the hair that flows is a lighter brown than when you end up taking off the suit completely in the other 2 endings. After grabbing that energy tank, we're going to head back to the left a little bit. When you make it back to this corridor, instead of just going back, instead you want to go in the Morph Ball form and bomb the floor. This will allow us to fall through. You can actually kind of make it over and go past this weird kind of like sand setup and fall down to the next area, opening up this door. You need 5 missiles in order to open up the next door, so you may need to destroy the zoomers throughout the area so that you have enough missiles. Every time you defeat an enemy, they have a chance of either dropping health, a missile, or potentially nothing. Interestingly enough, it takes an extra second after a lot of enemies are defeated for the item to appear, so you may start walking off and then realize, oh, they actually did drop whatever I needed. If you have enough missiles, blow open the door, hit the Chozo statue, and you'll get the Ice Beam. This, of course, will allow us to freeze enemies every time you fire at them. The only thing is, though, when you fire at them again, they end up unfreezing, so you have to kind of get used to that. The other endings of the game that I haven't mentioned yet are the ones for doing it under 2 hours and under 1 hour. The under 2 one is her in the leotard, which also unlocks New Game Plus, and then the best ending, of course, is the one in the red bikini, and this means that you had to beat the game in under an hour. So when you're going for 100%, like I am in this run, you have a very, very tight window to do it. One thing that you'll probably want to practice a bit when you're first playing is trying to get used to mine jumping. There's a couple of different things you can do with the Morph Ball and using the mines. You can kind of hit up and go out of Morph Ball form or double tap the jump button at the right moments, and you'll be able to kind of propel yourself upwards. There's also the ability to kind of roll off of edges with the Morph Ball, getting hit with a mine, and if you press up and jump at the same time, you'll do a really high kind of double jump in the air. It's not too far into the game where you're able to get the long or high jump ability, so it's only helpful in a couple of areas for kind of speeding up the game early on. However, you can still get around the entire map without using these special kind of jumps. They just end up leading to some really nice shortcuts by using them, and will help us get through the game, getting that under 1 hour time that will allow us to get the best ending. Now here we're going to be using the Ice Beam really to kind of its fullest here. We have to hit these enemies and start climbing up them. Then you want to wait for this enemy to bounce off the right wall, and when it comes back you can hit it again, and this will allow you to now jump on it with the ice form and be able to get to the higher platform. Now you can also use the mine jumps there in order to kind of bounce off that one top enemy in order to also get up there. So there are several ways to kind of take care of that area. Once you're up here though, head over to the left. I'm destroying a few enemies here and there to try to get some of my missiles back, but more importantly we find our second energy tank. From the energy tank, continue over to the left, dropping down the Morph Ball form and then bouncing off a mine to kind of roll through this area. You then want to make a big jump and you can kind of get through the wall. There's a couple of other destroyable blocks throughout here as well. Outside of that though, we can hit this enemy, do a big jump, and land on another one of the missile tanks. Next corridor, you want to look up and destroy some of the blocks just above you. At this point, when you do this in the game, there's a few things you can kind of do. You can do one of the mine jumps, and if you time it right with the double jumps, you can kind of get up there quickly. Or what I like to do usually is just wait for the blocks to start coming back, and as they do, I can jump on them and get to higher platforms where I need it. Now here I will be using the mine jump in order to help me out. This will allow me to bounce off of them and get up to this platform. Remember, later on in the game you end up getting the higher jump ability, which will allow you to do it without using the mine, but this way we can get it early. And here is one of the best items in the game, the Various Suit. It will change up Samus's appearance just a little bit in color, and also gives us a lot more defense as far as dealing with enemies. You're usually intended, of course, to get it much later in the game, so it doesn't end up being quite as helpful as it ends up being for us here. From there, just do a little bit of backtracking, destroying the floor that we came up through, and then now heading to the left. Metroid was developed by the Nintendo Research and Development Team 1, and they also were doing Kid Icarus at the same time. In fact, a lot of people worked on Metroid also worked on Kid Icarus, and it was hard to actually get both games finished in time for their release. There's also some small connections between Metroid and Kid Icarus, including the enemy known as Kometo, which is very similar in appearance to the Metroid. Once back into this area, we're going to head to the left, use the Morph Ball to destroy some of these blocks, and then go through kind of what looks like a tube here, which will allow us to easily get over to the left side. At this point, we've collected everything to get in Brinstar. We now can head off to the next area, which is known as Norfair. In order to get there, we're going to head over to the left, and this will take us back to this giant corridor that we were earlier. Except now we're just going to head way down. Be careful, of course, when you're falling. It will slow up a little bit so you can kind of see what's ahead, but still, it's very easy to kind of just run into enemies. Thankfully, we've gotten a few energy tanks at this point, so we should have plenty of health. After dropping down quite a bit, head on into this room. You can take out the enemies or just kind of run on through, and this will lead us to the first elevator that we're going to be using. After getting off the elevator, head down and to the right. Norfair is the most packed as far as items is concerned in the game. There's a lot of stuff to keep an eye out for and to find throughout Norfair. It also has the entrance eventually to Ridley's hideout. This room right here is pretty long, where we're going to be destroying a bunch of these blocks. If you don't know already, make sure that you stay out of the lava-looking stuff that's at the bottom of the screen. The longer you stay in it, of course, the faster your health will end up draining. Once in this corridor, head down, opening up the door, and then head through a pretty long corridor. This will eventually end up leading us to 2 missile tanks to collect. As you can probably tell, the ice beam is extremely useful. The only downside really with the ice beam is, of course, when you hit an enemy multiple times, them unfreezing, but also them getting in the way. When you hit one of these enemies and freeze them, sometimes it can end up blocking your path in tighter spaces. When you make it to this spot, just duck on down to the Morph Ball and then blast your way up a little bit. You'll have to destroy a few blocks throughout the course of this area. When you finally get out of this area, there's a couple of ways you can deal with this spot. You can freeze the enemies. I'm going to use one of the mine jumps to help me get higher. Or you can freeze the enemies at the right spot so that you're able to jump over that particular platform. Once over that though, grab the first of the missile tanks and then keep heading over to the left where you'll immediately find the second one. Once you have both of them though, head all the way back over to the right to that big corridor we were a few moments ago. This does mean that we have to destroy all of those blocks again when going back into the Morph Ball form. Of course, Metroid's known for being one of the first games to feature a female protagonist. It's something that's kept as a mystery until you end up discovering it by beating the game in under 5 hours. Even the manual says that her identity was shrouded in mystery and uses male pronouns throughout the manual, but of course, this could have just been a mistake for the NES North American release. After exiting out of the room where we got those 2 missile tanks, we're going to destroy the floor using mines, then head on down and you'll head through this room, which will lead us to the high jump boots. This will allow our normal jump to be much higher, which would allow you to get the various suit normally. Once you have the high jump, instead of going backwards, instead go in the Morph Ball form, destroying the floor, and you can actually kind of go into the piping below, and this will lead you to another chamber, and you can continue on through Norfair this way. You may still have to freeze a few enemies though in order to use them as platforms to get high enough up. The next item we're going to be getting is another one of the famous items from Metroid, and that is the screw attack. Heading on through this area, be careful of course of the lava below. Most of the enemies we're dealing with are pretty much just variations of ones we've been dealing with throughout the course of the game. Head on through into this corridor and jump up to this platform where you can blast open the floor and allow you to get up to the higher area. You can use the mine jumping or just wait for the blocks to start reappearing so that you're able to climb high enough. Once you're up here, head on over through this, which will lead you to this corridor and eventually the screw attack. The screw attack basically takes your jump and makes it deadly. Every time you jump, you're going to flash a couple of colors, and anything that comes in contact basically with you during this will be destroyed. This allows you to get through areas really fast since you'll be able to time your jump correctly and be able to run directly into the enemies instead of having to dodge or wait for them to go by you. Once you do have the screw attack though, head back and then just start destroying the floor again, heading back to this area and going now south even farther by destroying more of the floor past the doors that we initially had entered. Once here, we're going to head on over to the right through this room. Nothing overly exciting about this room, just a lot of enemies and some small platforms can be tricky in order to kind of jump over. The guys that spit stuff out of the lava are one of the more annoying enemies in the game for sure. Over here, you want to turn to the Morph Ball and use it in order to kind of blow open the floor, and you'll be able to kind of slide on through. Once right outside of that, though, is more of these little tiny small platforms for you to kind of work your way across. Once into this area, destroy the floor, and then you'll be able to kind of go over to the right and drop down, leading you to another area. Once in here, head all the way over to the left, and this will lead you to another energy tank. The original release of the game, the Famicom Disk System version, did of course have the feature to save, so it didn't have the password system, so it didn't have some of the oddities that we ended up getting, like the Justin Bailey code. It's always been highly debated whether or not the Justin Bailey code was intentionally put into the game, or whether or not it actually was just kind of a random glitch that had happened to work. Also, the FDS version does have a slightly different soundtrack because of the way that it ended up doing the music for games, and because of this I actually do recommend giving it a listen if you've never done so. Of course, Metroid has a fair amount of backtracking that we have to do here. If you want to speed things up a little bit and you know the game well, there is a way to pause the game and then press up and A on the second controller, which will get you to the password screen, basically counting as a death, which will allow you to kind of shortcut or get back to areas a little bit quicker. This is of course a trick that's used by a lot of speedrunners in order to beat the game quickly, as well as it's the same trick that's actually also available in The Legend of Zelda. Basically, to get where we're going next, we have to travel all the way over to the very far left of Norfair. Along the way, I'll kill a few enemies here and there just to keep some of the missiles up, but we should have plenty for when we meet them, and we'll be gathering plenty of more missile tanks throughout the game. When you make it to this room here, head down into the lava, destroying the floor and falling through. Drop on down here and head over to the right. The next item that we're going to be grabbing is the Wave Beam, another one of the weapons of the game. The Wave Beam is quite nice as far as damage and stuff goes, though interestingly enough it cannot stack with the Ice Beam, so when you have it, you won't be able to use that power to freeze enemies. The thing is though, you can actually get another Ice Beam if you've already collected one. There's 2 in the game. And if you end up getting both Ice Beams and then get the Wave Beam, the Ice Beam will return to its original location, so you can end up getting another one so that you can end up making sure that you have the Ice Beam for the final area of the game. While it's not necessary to have it, you can get through it without it. In this chamber is another one of those ones that contains not 1, but 2 of these missile tanks. Grab the first one, continue on through the area just a little bit farther to the right, where you will find and locate the second one. Once you have both of the missile tanks, then head back on through to the room here and start climbing back upwards. Once you're back up here, head on over to the right. Now, when we travel here, we're going to go all the way to the far right, eventually coming to a missile tank, before kind of coming back a little bit and going towards where the Wave Beam is located. Here you have another couple of sections where you have the big square of blocks that you'll have to destroy and kind of use your Morph Ball to kind of slowly make your way through it by destroying the blocks. When you get here, destroy the top block here, and then destroy the block right next to it, which will allow you to kind of get through this little green area, which will lead us to the missile tank. Once you grab the missile tank, then immediately just turn around and start going right back through this chamber. Of course, many years later, Metroid was remade as Metroid Zero Mission. They added an opening area, the outside area of Planet Zebes known as Criteria that was later shown in Super Metroid, as well as a full new area that was also introduced called Chizodia. There was also new weapons added, and the game plays very much like Metroid Fusion since that was the game that preceded it, it used the same engine. The biggest plus to the game was really kind of more expanding the story, integrating it more with the actual game itself, which of course the original just basically has story in the manual and that very tiny blurb at the beginning of the game. Once in here, don't go through the door, instead blow open the very far left block, and this will allow you to fall through into this chamber, which all the way to the left here leads us to the Chozo statue with the Wave Beam. The Wave Beam is pretty useful as far as destroying enemies. It also can destroy multiple blocks at one time with a single shot. Once we have it though, we're going to head backwards and then open back up this door and continue all the way over to the left. We have to do some more backtracking now. While the Justin Bailey code that I mentioned earlier in the game that became so famous may have just been a coincidence, there was one intentionally put in code, the Narpas sword code, which is the word Narpas, N-A-R-P-A-S, space, sword, and then all zeros. And when you separate it a little bit, you end up getting NAR password. It's also debated, of course, what the NAR stands for, but it's interesting enough that it was intentionally put in, and this ends up giving you infinite health, missiles, the ice beam, and every other power-up, missile expansion, and energy tank in the game right from the get-go. What's weird though is the code kind of works like a weird debug code instead of actually like a true password, because your health, while it doesn't ever run out, it ends up never being able to go below 30 or above 39, and the missiles can never increase over 5. One little final note with the whole password and save system in the game is it looks like it was intended to originally have some sort of battery backup. The board that the game uses in the North American release is an SN-ROM board, which is the same as 4 other games, 3 of which of those other games have a battery backup. The one that doesn't is Kid Icarus, which of course was developed not only by similar teams but released around the same time. Metroid was the first of these games released with this particular board, so it may have been intended to have battery, but maybe they just didn't have it quite worked out yet. We are finally back in the room where we ended up getting that high jump ability earlier on, and we can get to the long corridor that we need to on the very far end here. Once you're back in this chamber, head down. You'll have to fall a pretty good distance, so watch out for a few enemies as you do so. Head left through this room, just pretty much a lot of enemies and some lava, but overall nothing too exciting. When you get out to this room, head on down. You'll want to fall just a little bit, but be careful not to fall too far, because you'll end up missing the door that you need in order to get to the elevator, which takes us down into Ridley's hideout. Once you arrive, start heading down and to the left. You'll have 2 back-to-back hallways that look identical, but the second one you're going to want to fire at the ceiling above you and then work your way up to a hidden area. There's no new weapons or anything during Ridley's hideout. Instead, there is, though, 5 items that we are going to be getting, 2 energy tanks as well as 3 missile tanks. The first of those energy tanks is the one that's pretty well hidden up here. I congratulate anyone who was able to find this one initially without any sort of guide. That's all there is though in this area. Just grab that missile tank and then head on back. Once you get back into the hallway where we destroy the ceiling above it, we're going to head to the left now. Once in here, you have some pretty annoying kind of bouncing enemies, so thankfully timing the screw attack jump will allow you to get rid of a lot of them. A little bit in, you want to drop down to Morph Ball form and destroy the floor. You'll be able to get in here and then go all the way over to the very far left. The reason why you need to take the bottom portion here is there's a giant column, as you can see, that you won't be able to bypass. At the end, use a couple more mines in order to get up, and then destroy the wall using your missiles. Now be very careful in this room. In the very center is a hole that we're actually going to be using in just a second, but you want to make sure you initially jump over that hole so you can get the energy tank. If you don't grab it that way, you'll have to kind of go back around the other way in order to get back up and get another chance at it. Not a whole lot going on in this chamber, just a few enemies that will be able to easily kind of either run underneath of them or use the screw attack jump in order to get rid of them. Here, be careful, make sure that you get up so that you get into this little area, that you don't fall down, or else you'll have to go all the way around. Once in here, head over to the right where you will come across another one of the missile tanks. Once you have it, head back to the previous room, and then now you want to drop down. When you do so, go to the left side and enter into this room. This chamber is the last one before our first boss encounter, which is against Ridley. Make sure you have a good amount of missiles. We're going to be using all of them, or pretty much all of them that we have, in order to help us fight him. Once you enter the boss chamber against Ridley, switch over to your missiles, and then you're going to want to stand directly in front of him, just right here, and then start blasting him with every one of the missiles that you have. When you run out of the missiles, just finish him off using the wave beam, and there you go. Really, really simple fight. Once Ridley is defeated, go over to the left, destroy the wall here, and then make sure you're able to get in. There's a whole bunch of lava here, and it's a bit difficult to kind of get through without taking at least some damage, but at the end of the room is another one of the energy tanks. We're almost done here though in Ridley's hideout. There's one item we're missing, and that's another one of the missile tanks. Unfortunately though, it's a pretty decent distance away from everything else, because it's on a separate complete level of the hideout. So what we have to do in order to get there is start heading back over to the far right until we get to one of those tall chambers, the one that we fell down earlier, in order to kind of get into this area here. Of course, you'll probably notice, and like a lot of other classic NES games, there's a lot of slowdown when there's a lot of enemies and fire going on. It is interesting to note, though, that the FDS version of the game actually runs a bit better and doesn't have quite as much slowdown. This is something that's also noticeable in the port of Legend of Zelda 2 from the FDS version to the North American NES one. Also, due to more memory on the FDS version, enemies have a few different patterns to them that aren't seen in the North American version, thus making the North American version a bit easier to play. Once in here, head down and just immediately to the left, don't have to fall down too far here, and then just keep on going till eventually you will come to the missile tank that we need. Once you have the missile tank though, head on back, and we're now going to be leaving Ridley's hideout. There is a little bit more to it. If you keep going left, it'll basically just lead to another chamber and you can work your way up. Basically, Ridley's hideout is a giant rectangle, so either way you can kind of work your way through it. Once back in this room, instead of going through the door that we entered from in order to get down to that room, we're going to keep on heading north in order to go through the very top room. Just go left a little bit, and this will lead us back to the room that had the elevator. Take the elevator back up into Norfair, and now we're gonna go up into the upper part of Norfair that we haven't really explored yet, which will lead us to a whole bunch of more missile tanks. Once back at Norfair, head north a little bit. You'll have to kind of bounce on some of the blocks, and then go through this door. Just kind of walk on through, not a whole lot going on, a few enemies. The screw attack will easily take care of most things. Probably the most annoying thing is probably the things that come out of the lava and kind of spit at you. Interestingly enough, they can actually fire either 3, 2, or 1 fireball at a time in the FDS version of the game. Once back to this giant corridor, start heading up. We're going to be going up quite a distance here. When you come to the first kind of dead end, as there will be a set of blocks above you, you can destroy some of them and then kind of jump up, continuing your way. Like I had before, you can either kind of use the mine jump or just wait for the right timing and then get up. Once you're up here, then continue going north. While heading up here, this is the most amount of doors we're kind of going to pass in any given chamber. I also think this is the most amount of entrances and exits from a particular room in the game. Once you make it here, head on in and then head to the left where you will find not 1, not 2, but 3 missile tanks located in this room. Once you have all 3 of the missile tanks, head back to the previous chamber and continue heading upwards to the very last door that's located on the left. You'll once again have to destroy some of the blocks here in order to kind of jump up high enough. Once you're up here, head on to the chamber to the left, continue your way a little bit, and you'll come across 2 more missile tanks. Once you grab the second missile tank, keep heading to the left. You'll drop down a corridor, and as you come back, you'll actually be behind the location for where the second ice beam is. Since I already got the first ice beam and then the wave beam, I'm going to be grabbing the second one here so that we have the ice power again, as it's very helpful for the end of the game. Before we end up leaving Norfair for the last time, we do end up needing to get 2 more missile tanks. They're a little bit out of the ways though, they're kind of in their own separate area of Norfair, so didn't really have another opportunity to grab them before now, so what we have to do is go back to the big tall chamber that we climbed all the way to the very top. We're going to drop down a little bit, passing by a couple of doors, and going through a relatively long hallway to eventually get to the 2 missile tanks that we're missing. Nothing really too out of the ordinary as far as a lot of the rooms we're going to be traveling in. Right above us actually is where we're going to be coming right back in just a few moments in order to get to the elevator and head back to Brinstar. Since we didn't go this path the first time we came here, this is where the location of one missile tank is, and then we're going to continue through this room a little bit farther, drop down a small corridor into another hallway where the second one is. Once in here, just drop on down and immediately enter the next door, and just a few moments in is where you'll locate the last of the missile tanks for Norfair. We have a good majority of stuff so far in the game. We only have one more area that we're going to be exploring that contains items, as the final area of the game doesn't really contain anything other than the final boss and the end of the game. A pretty hefty trek back, but eventually we do get to the elevator chamber and we're going to head back up into Brinstar. From where we enter, we just need to go all the way over to the very far left, where we'll come across one of the very long, tall corridors that we've traveled through several times already in the game. It's a pretty hefty walk between where we ended up entering and where we end up getting to the elevator to go to Kraid's hideout, so we have quite a bit of walk to do. Besides the full remake in Zero Mission, Metroid has been re-released several times. The game was included as unlockable in both Metroid Zero Mission as well as Metroid Prime. Interestingly enough though, in Metroid Prime, the Japanese version of the game, you get the Japanese Famicom Disk System version that you end up unlocking. Though in Metroid Zero Mission for the Game Boy Advance, the Japanese version of the game ends up unlocking the North American NES version. The game was also released as part of the GBA NES Classic series, and also, of course, has been on Virtual Console. Though interesting that the Virtual Console version of the game caused it to be removed as an unlockable in the Wii release of Metroid Prime. Drop down here and go through this door, which will lead us to a room that has the probably most well-hidden item in the game, and that's this energy tank that I'm surprised anyone was able to find without some sort of guide. So over here to the left, you jump up, and if you shoot the block, you'll find an energy tank. Now, it only stays exposed for a few seconds and it ends up going away. You can use the mine jump like I'm using, or if you have the ice beam, you can freeze the enemy there, and that's probably how you're supposed to get it. Out of all the items that you collect in the game, only a couple of them are hidden in blocks, and that being one of them, the other one coming up a little bit later on in Kraid's lair. However, that one I just think in particular is just really difficult to find. After working our way around a little bit, we come to this room, which gives us the elevator down into Kraid's hideout or Kraid's lair. Here we're going to have 4 missile tanks in order to find, as well as 2 energy tanks. The one energy tank, though, is located in the same room with Kraid, so at least that one's pretty easy. It's just hidden inside of a block. There's a couple of paths you can kind of take through Kraid's hideout in order to explore it. The path that I'm going to start off by taking by immediately going left and finding our first of the missile tanks is probably the most efficient. After grabbing the first set of missiles here, keep going to the left past the enemies and enter into the next corridor. Now once you are in here, head on down. There's a few enemies of course, but you're going to land on this platform, but just keep falling. You'll fall through like the sand dirt area, and you'll make it through another very, very long corridor. You're going to end up walking through pretty much two identical hallways. The second one, though, has one of those doors you'll have to destroy with missiles. Once you destroy it, though, head into the next chamber, and just a few steps in, we will end up coming across our next missile tank. Now, as soon as you grab that, though, head back to this room here, and what we're going to do is actually destroy the floor located right underneath the entrance to this room, and falling down here will lead us to another kind of secret area. The room that we end up entering, though, is the chamber of the fake Kraid. He works and acts pretty much identical to the real Kraid, but it doesn't count when you kill him as far as defeating the boss. I don't know why they included like the fake version of him, though interestingly enough there is a fake Ridley also in the coding for the game, though it's never implemented at any point. Once we get past that room, head in here, and in the very center you can blow open the floor and drop down, and this leads us to the battle against the Real Kraid. This fight's kind of a crapshoot. Get your missiles out and start blasting them with them. Just kind of stay relentless, stay close to them if possible, because you'll be able to get more missiles out quickly. And it's just basically just staying alive and blasting them as much as possible. If you've collected half of the missile tanks that we've gotten so far in the game, you should have plenty of missiles to still be able to easily defeat him. Once you do that though, hit the wall in order to expose the energy tank, then jump up to the platform above where the door is, and then you want to morph ball down and hold right on the D-pad in order to kind of get into that small chamber where the energy tank is. That seems more complicated than it should be, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get the morph ball to enter into that small area with the energy tank unless I fell off that top right platform. With Kraid now defeated, we've defeated both bosses in the game, and we can technically go to the end and face off with Mother Brain, but we still have a few items to collect before heading into the final area. In this giant chamber, we have to start climbing up. You have all these blocks that you'll have to slowly kind of destroy. You need to move Samus up pretty fast though before the blocks ended up respawning. Keep on climbing till you come to the first door, enter inside of it, and just go a little bit ways in until you come to another missile tank. Once you have that, immediately go back to the previous room and continue your way up. The next door immediately above that is the next one that we're going to be entering. Once inside of here, just keep going all the way over to the left. Eventually you're going to come to one of those doors that you'll have to destroy with missiles, and into the very kind of tall center chamber, initially where we entered through the elevator, but we ended up taking one of the exits immediately to the left instead of heading farther south. In order to make things very easy for us, make sure that you don't end up falling down. Instead, you work your way over to the left with a nice jump, or you can use the Morph Ball jump, then jump up to the platform and keep heading up until you make it here, where you'll be able to destroy another one of these doors with the missiles. Once inside here, just head to the right. You'll have to destroy the wall and do a little bit of morph balling, but eventually you'll come to the next energy tank. Once you grab that though, immediately head back to the left to that corridor we were just in. Getting across some of the gaps in the Morph Ball can be a bit difficult. You have to kind of place a mine, usually, in order to kind of help you blast your way over, so you may want to practice that a little bit. Once back in this chamber, keep heading on up to the next one right above it. Once again, you'll have to destroy it with some missiles, but you have plenty at this point, and then just go a little bit ways in where you'll come across another missile tank. Now, this is the last item that we need here in Kraid's lair, though there actually is more rooms if you want to go to the far right here, and you can travel up to a whole kind of section of just endless rooms that lead pretty much to nowhere. But since we don't need to go there, we're going to head back in here. Just north of this is the elevator we took in order to get in here. Now, we're only missing a couple of items before we end up entering into the final place. Once you're out of the elevator, just head left and then all the way north through this very tall chamber. This actually leads us right back to the starting point of the game. Once we get to the top, you have the option to go left or right, and left is actually where we began. Once in this very tall chamber, just keep on heading upwards. Eventually you'll have an entrance on the left side. Don't enter the one on the right, just keep on going till you see one on the left side and enter the first one you come to. Over here to the left, by destroying the door, you'll find the last of the weapon upgrades in the game. This is the long beam, or the long shot, making our normal fire go a little bit farther away from us. Once you do have that though, go back to the previous chamber, and then continue heading upwards and enter the last door on the left. If for some reason you're getting relatively low on missiles, you may want to kind of stock up a bit before we head into the final area. Up here, we're going to head through this last little chamber, which will lead us to the statue room. Here, we're going to blast two statues, one of Ridley and one of Kraid, which, if you've defeated the bosses, they will activate, and thus a bridge will form, allowing you to go into the final area of the game. This is the location of not only the final boss of the game, Mother Brain, but also the Metroids. And they are quite annoying, they are quite deadly, they latch onto you and they drain your health really fast. Missiles are your best friend as far as destroying them, as well as the Ice Beam. Recommended is freezing them once with a shot with the Ice Beam, then switching over to your missiles and finishing them off using that. This final area in general is pretty linear, you're just kind of walking through it with the onslaught of Metroids coming towards you. If one grabs you though, you can blast it off of you, it just is a bit of a pain, and if you transition between rooms, you can automatically get it off of you. All this corridor is pretty much us just kind of going back and forth, left and right, slowly working our way down. A few Metroids, as well as you can see the other blast, are trying to make contact with us here. Here we have the last corridor before Mother Brain. There's just a lot of Metroids during this section. Just kind of take your time. You can blast them if you want to. I'm doing so I can make sure I have enough missiles for the Mother Brain encounter, because not only do you need them for her, you're also going to be destroying the little barriers that lead up to her. One problem with the Metroids though is they can end up kind of blocking your path, since they are pretty big, and when they freeze, they're just a giant rock in your way. This is the final area of the game here against Mother Brain. What you have to do is destroy all of these like other tubes that are set up and work your way like area to area while being bombarded with just tons of firepower from everywhere. It's kind of really hard to have a strategy. You can see kind of the trajectory of some of the cannons and the way they're going to potentially be firing at you, but for the most part, just kind of do some casual dodging. Maybe take a step or two forward, maybe dodge a bullet or two, or drop down to the bottom platform or level to kind of help you out a bit. The game does slow down also a lot during the segment, which does help a bit as far as dodging some of the attacks. When you actually get to Mother Brain though, blast open her chamber or casing or whatever, and then start immediately firing inside. Every time you land a hit, you can see everything starts to flash. Just kind of keep an eye a little bit on your health. Don't stand too much in like the line of fire. Change it up either on the platform with her or in that little kind of opening between the areas. Either way, when she finally is destroyed, you can see she gets faster and faster when she's about to die. Once she is dead though, it's time for the escape. We basically now have to just escape the facility before the timer runs out. If the timer runs out, it is a game over, and you have a good amount of time though. Basically, all you gotta do is make your way up these jumps. It's kind of like the same thing over and over again. I kind of get used to kind of going one way, then jumping up the other way, and kind of go back and forth. If you do fall a few times, you can fall a good bit and still be able to make it out. Usually only takes roughly about 200 or so of these ticking seconds or microseconds or whatever they are in order to kind of get out of the place. Interesting to note though, if you have only a few seconds left, like under 12 or so, the game can still end up ending with a game over and blow up as you're escaping in the elevator. So there you guys have it though, the best ending to the original Metroid on the NES. That's for beating the game in under 1 hour. We did gather everything, though it doesn't really calculate getting 100% or anything. You don't have like a save status screen that's going to tell you that. So it's kind of just a pride thing as far as making sure you got everything. Growing up, Metroid was one of those games I was never able to quite figure out, and the password system always ended up annoying me. I would always write the wrong things down, so I was never able to beat the game as a kid. My first Metroid that I was able to beat was Metroid 2, which happens to be my personal favorite, mostly due to nostalgia. As the credits finish up, we get the copyright 1986 by Nintendo, and then finally the end. Now, if you've beaten the game in under 2 hours and gotten either the second best or the best ending, you can press start and start the game over again, but now you're wearing the leotard or the suit that you would see in the Justin Bailey if you put that code in, and you have all of your weapons and stuff that you gathered throughout the first quest, but you don't keep the energy tanks or the missile tanks in this replay, but at least you have your weaponry. I figured though I'd show real quick just a few seconds of what Samus looks like in the leotard. Interesting enough though, when you collect the various suit, you end up getting the green hair appearance. That's why her sprite ends up changing. If you have the normal power suit, she instead has the brown hair. But with that guys, it's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course I hope you enjoyed.